Ukraine and the US have signed a resources deal establishing a joint reconstruction fund that will be financed by new mineral, oil and gas projects in Ukraine. The agreement will allow the US to benefit from Ukraine's critical mineral deposits. For more on this, we are joined by Zoya Sheftalovich, who is the contributing editor for Politico. Zoya, good to have you with us this evening. Now, how do you think, firstly, Ukrainians are feeling about this deal?
Ukrainians are relieved because this deal has been months in the making. It spectacularly was almost entirely derailed in that dramatic February meeting in the White House when Donald Trump and J.D. Vance attacked Volodymyr Zelensky. It's a vital piece of the puzzle towards a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine because it is seen as a sort of de facto guarantee of peace for Ukraine from the perspective of if the Americans have some sort of stake in Ukraine, then they will be more willing to defend it should the Russians return for another bite at the cherry. So Ukrainians are relieved. They are feeling some trepidation because the full details of this deal are not yet apparent. We don't know exactly what Ukraine is committing to and what guarantees the US providing, but generally there is a sense of relief in Ukraine.
Yes, I mean, we are seeing pictures of the Ukrainian Deputy Prime Minister who inked the deal there with the US. And she did say that this does not include provisions on Ukrainian debt to the US, but does provide an economic incentive for the US to continue its defense of Ukraine in terms of the war itself. So is this something that Americans would expect the Trump administration to do as well?
This is a bit of a different tone from the Trump administration than what we have become accustomed to over the past few months. Some of the things that we've seen in this deal or that we think are in this deal, because, again, we haven't seen the full text, but there are drafts that some reporters have seen and have reported on. There are inclusions in there such as, for instance, recognizing the full-scale invasion of Russia by Russia of Ukraine. That's a phrase that the Trump administration has avoided using. There's also essentially the Trump administration is no longer making such significant claims onto Ukrainian minerals, and they've stepped back from some of the provisions which may have blocked Ukrainian entry into the European Union. So there has been a softening of rhetoric from the Trump administration that we think is going to come through in this deal, and I think that might be it might be somewhat surprising considering the rhetoric Trump and the administration have employed over the past couple of months. But at the same time, I think the Americans expected that Trump was driving a hard bargain in order to get the best possible deal. And I think they knew that eventually a deal probably would be struck. So I think they might be a bit surprised, but hopefully not too surprised by what has happened.
Yeah, so given the scope of this deal, would this then add an extra layer of concern for Russia in its war campaign, and how might Moscow respond?
It will definitely be concerning for Russia because the Russian state media, Putin, and all those around him in the Kremlin have been absolutely celebrating any division between Ukraine and the United States, which is Ukraine's largest backer and the only real guarantee of security in the long term. So this will be very concerning for Putin, particularly because along with this deal came some very strong words from the Trump administration with respect to Russia's role in the war. Trump has been increasing his rhetoric about Putin and the fact that he continues to bomb Ukraine despite the negotiations ongoing. You do get the sense that Trump is souring on Putin a little bit. And so I think for Putin, that would be a worry because he's been absolutely relishing the fact that Zelensky and Trump got off on such a bad start during their meeting in the Oval Office in February. He's been loving all of the comments coming out of the Steve Witkoff as he's been traveling to and from the Russian capital, Moscow, to have negotiations with Putin directly. So certainly it's something that Putin will be worried about because it does mean that the Americans have an incentive to continue to provide weaponry. And in fact, we think there's a clause in the deal that says that the Americans may even provide air defenses. So that would be quite spectacular if that is indeed something that Trump has opened the door to. And I think that will be very worrying for Putin.
And of course, digging up these critical minerals and rare earths doesn't happen overnight. But how long then can the U.S. expect before this deal actually materializes into minerals exports?
So there is also actually oil and gas in the deal. So oil and gas is probably a much quicker return on investment. When it comes to some of those critical minerals, the lithium and that sort of thing, that is much more experimental. It's a longer term thing. It takes, years and years to develop that sort of industry. And the funny thing is that people call it rare earths. They're not particularly rare. The difficulty is in actually extracting them and what you need to do that. So certainly it's a long-term commitment. And again, per the drafts that some folks have seen of this deal, it seems like the US is committed not to take any money out of Ukraine for the first 10 years, and that all of the money from that investment fund will actually be reinvested in Ukraine's reconstruction. So it does appear like the Americans are prepared for a long-term deal, and they're prepared to not profit in the first decade.
And, how might China be viewing this, in the context of this trade war with the US, given that China accounts for 90% of the refining of rare earths?
I think this is very bad news for Beijing. Beijing has been stoking the war from the very beginning. The no holds barred, no limits friendship with the Kremlin has seen Beijing provide significant support, despite denying the fact that they're providing real and tacit support. They have been providing support. We know that the Chinese have been fueling the Russian war machine. And certainly it's in Beijing's interest to maintain divisions between Ukraine and with the United States. That is definitely something that China would like to see happening. So this would be a bad news situation for China.
Okay, Zoya Sheftalovich, really good to get your analysis. As always, thank you very much.
Thank you.